Good afternoon, everyone. Ooh, I'm Dr. Maiysha. For those of you who do not know who I am, but I think by now most people know who I am because I've come on here every week. I am the founder of the Mind ReMapping Academy, NLP master practitioner and trainer of neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis, and timeline therapy. Well, if you all have been watching, you know that we just came off of an amazing retreat. I'm not going to talk too much about it because you're going to be seeing a lot of posting of pictures, but I just am so grateful to have been able to have the 9 amazing women that I had sharing and contributing and creating transformation with me this past weekend. And just giving a shout out to Michelle, my co-facilitator, for really helping this to be an amazingly done retreat. So that I really want to talk today about, and I've been thinking about this for a while, but then I had an interaction with my son yesterday that made me want to do this today, which is how we listen and what we could be missing. So, as most of you know, I co-parent my son with his amazing father who lives in another state. So, as such, there are times when I have to meet um, him at the state line and we do our exchange. And oftentimes it's in the evening and sometimes it's in the daytime. But this time, yesterday, it was in the evening. And my son was his summertime. He's probably not on the same sleep schedule as he typically is, and it starts out very, very loving, very excited. He's excited to be back with mommy after being gone for a week, and then very quickly into the trip, I noticed that he started to get irritable and irritated. And that was followed by some whining and some talk back, or some very specific ways that he was interacting with me. And so for me, the old me, I would say, the me that was maybe some years ago, would have automatically reacted to that in such a way. By scolding him, by I'm gonna threatening to pull over to the side of the car, to the side of the road, all of the things, right? And in the moment, even though it was activating me, even though it was stressing me to be on the highway, with my son acting the way he was acting in the back seat, there was something that had me understand or see or hear something that he wasn't saying, which was he was tired and he really, really wanted my attention. And, in that moment, and I was on the phone part of the time that we were writing back on a conversation that had been on before I picked him up. And so it was, sort of finishing that conversation. In the moment, I recognized, like, he really missed me and really wants my direct attention. He didn't want to play with the iPad, which is unusual for my 7-year-old son. He didn't want to listen to a podcast or look at a show. He wanted my direct attention. So got off the phone and I asked him, like, what's going on? And he says to me, as he's dealing with all of the emotion, I don't want to talk about it right now. I really just had a bad day. And he says, well, can you just be nice to me? Can you just be really nice to me? Because I just had a bad day. And I said, to my son, I said, yes, I can be nice to you. And I need you to speak to me with respect. That will help me to be very nice to you. And he says, oh, and I said, you got it? He said, I got it. So then he proceeds to fall asleep in the car and take a little nap. And so, one of the things that I got for myself is that, the old me wouldn't have heard that he was tired and he was cranky and that he wanted my attention. I just would have heard the whining. I just would have heard the irritation in my brain, my own thoughts that were going in my head. And when we got home, of course, we went straight to bath time, and he usually would go straight to bed. But this particular night I asked him, did he want to stay up a little bit longer and watch a little show with me and cuddle with me? Because I know that was the thing he was missing, and he was just like ecstatic to do that. And even though bath time was, was full of emotion and meltdowns, I mean, the whole evening was a meltdown from my son. I could really be with that he was tired and he needed some love, a cuddling up. And it was interesting to be in that space of listening for my son. Because even though this is the work that I do, this is the work that I do every day, listening to people, listening for inside of organizations, what's missing, and listening for the dynamics that happen between people. When you're up close and personal and in the emotional swirl, it can be difficult to hear what's beyond what the actual interaction, what's beyond what's being said, beyond the words that are coming out. And so I thought, this would be a really great conversation to have today. And so how do we usually listen? When I like to talk about how we usually listen and what the automatic way of listening is, because our brains are basically machines, little computers, and we're programmed by our upbringing. And you've heard me share this before: our upbringing and our past experiences and our beliefs and the values that have been instilled into our um, ourselves through our parents and the media and all of that. So we're taught to listen a particular way. We're taught to listen to respond. We're taught to listen to agree or disagree. We're taught to listen for what's right and what's wrong, for what's good and what's bad. We're taught to listen through our various filters. The problem with that is that when we're listening that way, we miss the communication. We can miss the communication entirely, or we can miss partial communication. And when we're talking about this interaction in our kids, it's one thing. But when we're talking about this interaction in our workplace, particularly managers and leadership to employees, particularly between cultures, cross-culturally, or in our personal relationships, when we are not fully listening, where we're only listening for what we can get out of it or what we can say to prove our point, to prove us being right, then we're missing the opportunity to expand the possibility of solutions. We're missing the opportunity for creativity, and we're missing the opportunity for connection. And that is largely the problem with what's happening in our world today. We are not listening beyond our own filters. Now, one might ask, well, how do you even do that? Like, if you're the fish in water and you're in the swirl of the meltdown, so to speak, the swirl of the emotions, how do you stick your head up outside of that to be able to move beyond the boundaries of what you're experiencing? And the simple answer for that is that it takes practice. It takes practice. But even before then, there has to be this an awareness that what you're hearing through a particular filter, your own particular filter. And when you can become aware of that and aware of what those filters are, then you can begin to say, what if I wasn't listening through that filter? What could I be missing if I wasn't listening through that filter? What could I be hearing if I wasn't listening through this filter? And there are multiple filters, right? So then to distinguish what are all those filters is very valuable. And it's not that you're going to drop all those filters once, while you could over time, right? You might tinker with one filter at a time. Maybe it's the filter of, I need to be right. So maybe if you tinker with that filter and say, well, what if I was wrong? What if I was not listening to be right? How would I be listening? If there was no pressure for me to be right, how would I be listening? Or if there was no pressure for me to prove a point, or if there was no binary good or bad, how would I be listening to this person? Could I hear something in what they're expressing that reflects how I am being? And so these are the things that get missed when we are not when we're listening in that through that sort of automatic listening, the already always mechanical automatic way that we think, right? So it's important to be able to recognize that in that moment, these filters in that listening, and to be able to interrupt. And some of the ways that we interrupt is just by questioning our thinking. This is one of the exercises we did do in the retreat, and many of you know, and I think I've even shared it on the live before. There's a line of questioning that I've taken and modified from Byron Katie. There's a book called Henny Penny, and for those of you who are old enough to remember Henny Penny, The Sky is Falling. There's a book that's done by, it's co-authored by Byron Katie, and I cannot remember the name of the other author, but it is a version of The Sky is Falling, Henny Penny and The Sky is Falling, where they ask, if there's a particular thought process that's happening, is it really true? How can you know for sure that it's true? Right? What if it was true? And this is a way of thinking in the moment that expands your listening, right? If a person is speaking to you and you're being activated by that speaking, and your first thing is to want to rebuttal, because that's the bodily sensation that comes up. You listen through whatever filter you're listening through, and it triggers, it activates in you an emotion, which goes to a thought, which compels you to want to take an action, or to want to rebuttal, or to want to interrupt. Before you do that, you can just recognize and notice the response and reaction in your body, and begin, as you're listening, continue to lean into the listening, into the discomfort of what that, because sometimes what a person is saying, once they say what they say, will shift, and you'll actually hear what you need to hear. And sometimes you won't. And it's useful for you to be able to really evaluate your response before it comes out of your mouth. And to do that, sometimes you have to evaluate your listening and what's actually coming in through those filters, and questioning and tweaking and adjusting those filters along the way. So I think that's really what I wanted to talk about. But what I'll say is, with my son, my normal parent listening, so the filter that I listen through is, I'm aware, is that through that of a parent. But sometimes that parent listening is old school parent, and sometimes that filter is conscious parent, right? And I'm on this journey, I'm always expanding the conscious parenting part of me. And I must admit that growing up in a home in the 80s, that old school parenting was very much enforced. And so I catch myself sometimes in that old school mindset. And most times, hi, Dr. Isla. Most times when I catch myself, then I can actually reframe in the moment. But sometimes I don't. And I may start a conversation inside of the old school parenting framework and have to shift in the moment. Or sometimes I don't shift, and I have to come back and acknowledge where I went wrong, or I went awry. So as I was saying, with my son, the the listening that I was able to access in those moments where he was acting the way he was acting because he was feeling the way he was feeling. I was able to access that conscious listening that allowed me to listen beyond and offer him exactly what he needed. And what that did for him was gave him space. So he came and he cuddled with me, and after his bath, he says, "Mommy, I'm so sorry that I yelled at you earlier." And of course I said, "I forgive you. You're tired." And he says, "Yeah, I'm tired and I'm cranky." And I said, "I get it." And we cuddled up and we laid together and watched a little TV, and then I sent him to bed. And this morning, oh, and when I took him up to bed, he did finally say, he said, "I'm ready to talk about what happened that made me so cranky and sad." And he shared with me what it was that happened. And I was able to, and console and empower him in that moment, and not try to fix it, but just allow him the space to feel what he felt. And that next morning he got up, he's this morning bright as the sun, and again came and apologized. "I'm so sorry that I yelled at you." Um, and he said, "I just really was tired and cranky yesterday." And I said, "I know, and I forgive you." And we hugged it out. And I attribute that to the fact that I listened beyond my filters that yesterday. It was one of the successes that I can claim. And I'm not perfect. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Hisla. And I'm not, perfect at it by any means. I never claim to be, because this is a journey. And perfectionism, well, it's a characteristic of dominant culture. And so, I always say progress, not perfection. And that was a victory of expanding my listening, of being listening beyond my filters. So the question I have for you, and the invitation, the question I have is, so what are the filters? What is the area of life that you want to start to listen beyond your filters? And as you think about that area of life, think about the filters that are in place about that area of life and the way you already listening. Whether it's in a partnership, a romantic relationship and dating, whether it's in your parent-child relationship, spousal relationship, whether it's in a friendship or a you to your parents relationship, whether it's in leadership to your colleagues or to your employees, or your employees to your manager or to your bosses. What are the filters you already listen through? I know I recently um, worked with an organization in which one of the filters of this particular cultural group is that uh, they can't speak up. Like they have to be passive and go along with whatever is being said. And that's just a cultural filter. Yes, we have individual filters, we have societal filters, we have cultural filters, we have ancestral filters. And by the end of the session, they were empowered that that was a filter, and that they could expand outside the boundaries of that filter to be able to say whether they needed in their organization to feel safe as a group, a cultural group of people. And so, um, what area of life, what level of filter are you operating on? And what filter would you like to begin to shift and change? And this is, again, one of the things that I teach in my programs, in the NLP trainings. And so if it's something, if it's a skill that you really want to begin to master in your listening and your communication, because mastery of listening gives you mastery of communication. It's the beginning, it's the foundation of communication mastery. So if you want to begin to learn those tools, then you might consider training, getting a full training in NLP, and learning the language patterns and the listening patterns and the mechanisms underneath how the mind works, so that you can be empowered in whatever area of life that you choose. It is a training and it is a certification. And so if you're a coach, if you're a healthcare professional, medical professional, and you're wanting to use this with others to empower others, it's an incredible way to transform others' lives as well. So you all know how to reach to me, how to get in touch with me. If you want that, you can, if you're on Instagram with me, click the link in the bio. If you're on YouTube with me, you can go to the description. And if you are on any of the other platforms, LinkedIn or Facebook, you are welcomed to message me directly. And you can schedule a free call with me to learn a little bit more and about the upcoming trainings in September, in November, and January, and get yourself in. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say for today. I hope that you all have had a good start to your week and that you continue to have an amazing, productive, transformational week. And I look forward to our next one. All right. Have an amazing week. Namaste.